Hey everybody, this is Silverspook, and this is the Silverspook video on justice and how we get it. And of course, in the context of the ICJ recent ruling and how direct struggle impacts justice and how court decisions impact justice, and what is the relationship between all of these things. So obviously the International Court of Justice this week has ruled on South Africa's side. I think most people know about it by now, but in case you don't, South Africa recently brought to the International Court of Justice, which is under the United Nations. South Africa brought the case that Israel is committing a genocide with I think almost 100-page, very well argued by most accounts, very strong case for the I'm not supposed to say that word. the GEN word. And so because South Africa has, let's just start with the basic facts. So South Africa brought that case. There was a really big hearing. Took several days. That Israel responded with what they responded. We'll be generous in the beginning of this. They responded with their own case of why they're not committing the G word. And so what happened is the court has been adjudicating for the last weeks, and now they come out with their verdict, which is that let's see if I can get the actual verdict here. ICJ ruling. It's difficult to talk about this without violating the illegal words in the unfree place we live and have to stream from. I just want the actual facts. I don't care about the opinions at this moment. 17-judge panel ordered Israel to halt any what's a good word? Genovia. When I say Genovia, it means the G word, okay? While the 17-judge panel ordered Israel to halt any genovial acts in Gaza, it stopped short of ordering immediate ceasefire. The 17-judge panel at the International Court of Justice in The Hague issued a series of rulings on Friday about Israel's contact during its war against Gaza that constitute a significant legal defeat for Israel and its chief defenders, the U.S. and Germany. It's just interesting that Germany, a country that obviously has never ever been involved in the G word. But anyways, it found that there is a basis to proceed with the case against Israel for Genovia, and that South Africa had a solid foundation to bring its case before the world's highest court. The ICJ's chief judge, Joan Donoghue, said provisional measures against Israel were necessary because the catastrophic humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip is at serious risk of deteriorating further before the court renders its final judgment. And so, okay, so we had to we had to expedite things because of the current extreme circumstances. The full proceedings against Israel will take many years to complete. So, just one thing off the bat here, right? The full proceedings against Israel will take many years to complete. If this crime against humanity of the G word, right, is already completed, what is the purpose of courts? I mean, that's just a kind of obvious one, right? It's like this court is not capable of preventing some of the greatest, or one of the greatest ongoing crimes against humanity at this moment on the planet Earth. What is the point of courts at all? That's one. I mean, I think that many people are asking that question right now. What do we have? What do we have judges and juries and people who are paid billions of dollars? Why do we have millions of people, lawyers, judges, justices, international court justices, Supreme Court justices, federal court, state court justices? What are judges? What are courts for? If you can't stop, right? You literally can't even begin to stop anything. The most heinous crimes in the world. And this is not the first. By the way, this is just to expand a little bit. This is not the first time this has happened. Many mass killings, war crimes have been happening all around the world for the last very long time. We'll just say in the last 100 years they have been nonstop happening all around the world. And the ICJ hasn't just popped into existence. It's been around that whole time, right? Since World War II. The ICC, International Criminal Court, has also been around this whole time. Hasn't stopped any of these horrible, heinous crimes. So, in that sense, just reacting to this sentence here, right? If we're talking about how do we get justice, even if you believe in some kind of like abstract, hypothetical, theoretical, platonic sense, if you believe that we should get justice through courts empirically based upon the de facto situation, it is not working. It is not. The ICJ is not capable. just with that, like, it's gonna take us years to adjudicate what will So I mean, just in that sense, like, it wasn't a court that ultimately stopped the genocide in Nazi Germany. It wasn't a court that stopped. It wasn't a court that stopped the genocides in Africa to the extent that they have in some cases, right? It wasn't a court that stopped apartheid in South Africa. People like to compare apartheid South Africa to the Israel-Palestine situation, right? And it wasn't adjudicated in the court. I mean, some events happened in courts, yes, but that wasn't the main force that stopped the injustice of the horrible racist apartheid oppression in South Africa or Rhodesia, or the French colonial occupation and horrible oppression and basic enslavement of Vietnamese people in French occupied Vietnam, or U.S. occupied Vietnam, which the Vietnam War was a war crime, right? It wasn't, a court didn't adjudicate that, the end of the U.S. genocidal mass killing of innocent civilians. Very similar to Palestine. Very similar, right? Bombing of villages, bombing of civilians, right? Burning things down, destroying the food supply, right? Just like Israel bulldozing all of the olive trees and cutting off the food. Israel will talk about putting Palestinians on a diet, right? Which is genocidal activity, starving people to death, right? So what the U.S. did to Vietnam on a bigger scale, in terms of total death and total starvation and total people harmed, the U.S. did to Vietnam. That's just one U.S. war, right? That's just one U.S. genocide. In one U.S. genocide, the U.S. did more to Vietnam than Israel is doing presently. I mean, it doesn't what make Israel is doing better, but the International Court of Justice existed during the Vietnam genocide by the U.S. The International Court of Justice did nothing at that time. There wasn't even a hearing. The International Criminal Court existed during the Vietnam War. There wasn't a hearing for that. There was not a peep either out of them. The U.S. Supreme Court, all the European courts, right? All these places, the halls of justice. There was no. Again, this is one of the greatest crimes in the Vietnam War genocide. Or you see how, like, and this is where the language is important, because if you classify it as a war, then it's like, well, both sides, right? As Donald Trump famously said, well, both sides have a lot of fault on each side. This is kind of like when a Caucasoid, eco-socialists say humanity's failed the climate and ecology or something like that, right? It's kind of like and so when you call a thing a war, right? Like it's the Israel-Gaza war, then it's Palestinians have a lot of faults, and so it's so sad that it takes two to tango. That's a white saying. It's so sad that this conflict happened, and it's really complex. That's also Western culture to call these things complex. Both sides have a lot of fault. It's just a conflict that it's just out of control, and we just have to settle it down and have some peace again. I mean, if your side is doing more and the actual vast majority of the harm and benefiting from, right, this unjust situation, then it's in your benefit to say that, well, it's really complicated, right? Because you don't want to be called to the mat for it, right? So this is Western culture, is to constantly be trying to offload the responsibility for things, because you benefit the most, right? The Western countries and the white people benefit the most, and the richer the better, from international evil, basically. War crimes against humanity, injustice that benefits a white supremacist, capitalist, colonialist system, right? And so in that sense, this is why you will never see in the ICJ is in Europe. Let's be clear, it's controlled by the United States, which is, all those things I just said. So the international courts, certainly, and I would argue courts in general, certainly Western courts, right, have no, they are not impartial. They are not blind, right? It's obvious, and also even if they do rule in favor in favor of the oppressed side, that doesn't mean that anything is going to change at all, right? But I think it's important to state that the ICJ and the ICC have not convicted a single actual war criminal that's come out of a Western country like the U.S. or European country. That's important. They haven't actually. The only one who's been convicted is African. African leaders have been convicted. Basically, when it benefits the United States and Western countries, right? So these are courts, right, adjudicating, right, ostensibly looking at evidence, having extremely deep, they spend years of their life, they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of their life, and they get paid millions of dollars, these lawyers and justices in Western courts, right, to understand what is right and wrong, right, to be able to, hear complex arguments, about the various, to be able to weed through all of the nitty gritty of constitutional law and, the means justifying the ends or ends justifying the means, deontology, there's all these, all of this like complex philosophical, theoretical, advanced knowledge that you need to be able to, dispense justice, right? I would argue actually like the legal profession is mostly all fraudulent, and it is unnecessarily, and that's part of why I say is like the direct struggle versus court rulings, right? Because as many people have discovered, right, as I said, the complexity of the Palestinian question, the complexity of the war, the conflict, right? It's not a conflict, it's a genocide, right? The existence of Israel is a apartheid settler colonial regime, right? It's not complex, right? But the insistent Western culture, the Western side, the white side, is to insist on complexity, which requires 8-year degrees, right? Also, fun fact, just this is actually directly relevant to law, but it was something that I recently came across thanks to one of our black comrades. Did you know that there was no bar exam? You know, the bar exam is what you take in order to be qualified to practice law, right? As a lawyer, and then also to adjudicate law as a judge, you have to also pass the bar exam, right? So to be deemed sufficiently educated in the complexities, right, of the dispensation of justice, you have to pass this. You have to pass the what's known as the bar exam, which is administered by the authorities of the United States or wherever else you're in, right? There was no bar exam until black people became allowed to go to law schools. The American Bar Association tried to keep the practice of law white, and it went on record to do it. So actually, this is directly relates to, of course, critical race theory, which was started by students of color at American universities who rightly felt that there were many biased decisions in courts based upon racism existing in the culture, and you couldn't get a fair ruling if you had a large number of white jurors or white judges and white people, right, adjudicating with racist ideas against a black person to find them guilty or innocent, right? And so, but the bar exam itself was created, right, as a way to maintain unjust white supremacist prejudice in the legal system, right? So right, so it's actually the bar exam did not come into existence in order to weed out those who are incapable of deciding whether Derek Chauvin is guilty of murder or not. Obviously, he is. Anybody with two eyeballs could see that. I mean, it's a little bit more. You have to look at like a little bit more evidence, but it's not. It is a little. There is some work it takes to do some investigation, but some things are very clear, right? It's not and the law is not. It's not actually that complex, right? Are you a human? Do you have basic morality? I know that's a lot to ask for a lot of certainly billionaires and many Westerners in general. I mean, it's really sad, right? People, this stuff is not that morality, and then by extension justice, right? Which is doing what is morally right, right? It's not complex. Did you kill someone? Everybody knows this. That's right or wrong. Children can tell you this, right? Children don't need 8 years of $94,000 a year. That's what it costs to go to Pennsylvania University. Children don't need 8 years of multi-years of 5-figure college debt and education to learn what's right and wrong. Now, there's some more specifics you need when you're like making specific decisions, but that's not like this stuff is not the amount of money and time and invested in law, because law is like one of the biggest, outside of business schools, like business school, law school, and both of those things do not require huge amounts, vast quantities of education and resources and time to get training in. There are things that do require, there are things that are complex, like designing a quantum supercomputer that calculates in a millisecond what it takes 100 trillion years for any Western computer to do. That's what Chinese computers can do. I mean, that's complex. Making a quantum computer, figuring out how to make a more efficient solar panel that can harness gigawatts of electricity, and how to network those in a way that doesn't disrupt the environment very much, and that's complex. Actual science, tech, engineering, the actual, in some of the human complexity of like how to understanding cultures and trying to make a peace between cultures and build understanding. Like some of those things are complex. Dealing with humans in social settings can be complex. What is right and wrong? It's not that complex. People know. People know. Now, in a place that hasn't had any justice ever, like in the West, where it's been basically, certainly the United States, has been racism from top to bottom. There have been unjust court rulings from Derek Chauvin all the way back to 1776 and before that, right? When black people were literally enslaved. Speaking of apartheid, speaking of genocide, the U.S. was founded in genocide and mass killing and continued killing and oppression of indigenous people, right? So the U.S. has been, from 1492, for the Western world, including all the settler colonies, the U.S., Canada, Australia, New Zealand, now Israel, all of them have been in perpetual injustice the whole time, right? So, and everybody knows that. It's not, you don't need a PhD to figure that out. They know that. Just people like being unjust and having to work less to have material goods. Some people do. Some people feel bad about it, but they're scared of the other white settlers and the government that will hang them or attack them or kick them out of their in-group if they call for justice for black people and indigenous people and Palestinians and for actual racial justice. So, but it's important for people to know that the legal system, the bar exam was set up to perpetuate injustice. So the whole U.S. and I would argue the whole Western legal system is a organized criminality and organized immorality system. It's not a system for justice. If we pull back, so the idea that courts dispense justice is nonsense. Capitalism is a system of economic injustice, and all Western countries are capitalist, and they have with basically zero reining of it in. So they're all systems of injustice, right? This also makes there are many countries in the world that have let's say greed and self-interest based businesses that may not be run democratically and justly internally, right? But then they also have governments that do have the legitimacy of the people, that have courts, and then have not just the court, but they also have military and enforcement backing behind that can rein in the economic injustice of those capitalist entities, right? So, and those countries are not perfect countries either, but they also exist in a global system where Western colonialist, imperialist, genocidal, barbaric entities like the U.S., NATO, Europeans, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Japan, and all their vassals, right, exist. And so globally, you have to see it globally. There is a mass injustice system that is all those countries that I just mentioned, and then there's other countries that are not perfect countries, but they're have. I'm not going to mention who they are. We don't need to say right now, but there is a counterforce that is. Those other countries that are on the other side of that are historically those that have had the most injustice lobbed at them in the colonial era, right? And they're just coming out of that, right? So similarly, in the same way that if you benefit from the global injustice system, you want everything to be complex, require a lot of certifications to understand, which it doesn't. It's not that complex. You want to have lots of quote unquote peace. Peace just means, right? Peace just means the continued of the injustice system, right? That's like the Black Lives Matter slogan was, one of them was no justice, no peace, right? The Palestinians will say also, most of them, Israel is not giving us justice, and so there will not be peace, right? Because if things going smoothly for Israel is our continued degradation, the last 70 years of mass death and suffering and slow torture to death, mass caloric starvation, being sniped at, shot at, terrorized our whole entire life. And we prefer a not the unjust apartheid peace is no peace at all. It is systemic, worse war on us that benefits Israel. So if Israel is not gonna give us justice, then everyone will be disrupted. Everyone will be disrupted, and ideally, what we want is the end of the unjust Israeli occupation, the genocidal, unjust U.S. and U.K. colonial sponsored, UK initiated, many years ago. It's a decades, ultimately centuries ago, but certainly since 1948, we want the end of that entire occupation. This whole thing is unjust, just like America is all unjust. Its entire existence is a fraud, and an unjust fraud. But so you see how so there is no court, and there's another court, but I can't recall off the top of my head which a black revolutionary activist said it, but do not seek justice in the courts of the colonizer, in the enemy's courts, right? So because you won't get it, right? It's like you if the entire existence of Israel is an unjust place, so you certainly can't seek it there. But also it's in the United States, right? Seeking justice in its courts when the entire system of the United States is it's capitalist, colonialist, racist government, and that backs all of its corporations, and it's the majority of its Americans who are brainwashed into a system of unjust white supremacist capitalism. Asking those courts for justice is not where you're going to get it, right? And this is why Black Lives Matter, happened, and not just that. Maybe in the 1990s. In the 1990s, there was also a big explosion in the early 90s. And speaking of courts, and it was the last time the Insurrection Act, which is where the U.S. federal government can take control of National Guards of a state. If a state is basically, it harkens back to the Civil War era. If a state is acting against the federal United States government, the federal government can take control. And the last time that extreme rule, that's all, the law was used, was against black people in California rising up, very similar to George Floyd, against the white police officers who were acquitted. They got off scot-free after beating the black person Rodney King to death, and it's caused a huge explosion in black people in the streets and their supporters rioting, and not saying no, this is not justice, and so there will not be peace in America, right? And the U.S. federal government sent the military into California, and took to subdue and to force the unjust verdict down the throats of black people in the United States. But it's basically like, you will accept that white cops can murder you with impunity for racialized capitalism, which is what America's run on, and globally colonial and neocolonialism. You will accept that, and we will invoke the Civil War era, to prevent the country from breaking into pieces. We will use the laws of the United States simply in order to force the unjust court rulings down your throat under threat of mass military murder. Okay, it's this sense, like, and the ICJ again is under the United States because the U.S. runs the UN. Let's be real. So similarly, this idea that you can get justice through criminal, colonialist, barbaric entities like the U.S. and any of its allies is just, in the 1990s, that proved absolutely false. When Black Lives Matter happened, right? Black Lives Matter, right, blew up. 10 million. So just some news on Black Lives Matter. 10 million settlement with 50 plaintiffs harmed by police. Response to 2020 Black Lives Matter. I mean, paying people some hush money and saying accept the injustice that is the continued what were the demands of Black Lives Matter, right? Black Lives Matter was the greatest uprising in the history of the United States, right? Um, there were like, I think the final count was like 31 million people at least in the United States. It was a good 10% of the United States population, right? That went out for almost a year in the streets. Police stations were burned down. The windows of countless, Walmarts and Targets were broken. The entire streets were shut down across the entire country for a long time. There were the National Guards were called out all over the place. There was martial law set down across the United States because an innocent black man was murdered on camera, recorded on camera by a white police officer, kneeling on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Okay, and the courts didn't. Nobody dispensed any justice. The United States government obviously gave no justice whatsoever, as it never has. And the guy wasn't even, he was just let off scot-free, just like in the 1990s. And so, and there were what were the demands, right? What were the demands of Black Lives Matter, right? Defund the police. We want the end of police brutality, right? There is not a monolith, right? Obviously, different people have different demands, but we want to decrease the police budgets. We want the police stop murdering black people and non-white people with impunity. We want the end of we want no more of this prison industrial complex. We want to release the unjustly incarcerated prisoners by the U.S. police. We want to, some people call for abolish the U.S. police, but certainly defund the police, stop the police committing these heinous crimes, stop white people. Like, remember, Ahmaud Arbery was shot by random white citizens while he was jogging. Right, he was just jogging down the street, and then two white guys saw a jogger and then got out of their truck and shot him for basically no reason except racism and colonialism and being Israelis with American characteristics, or Americans with Israeli characteristics, but it's the same thing because Israel is a white Euro settler colony. So anyways, so back to Black Lives Matter was a point in the U.S. history where there was a huge mass uprising because of the injustice of the U.S. system. Right? They wanted justice for George Floyd. They demanded justice for George Floyd. Nothing was happening. And to be clear, there are thousands of police officers every year that kill innocent people in the United States, and nothing happens to them. They get defended. The United States backs them. The Israeli Defense Force directly trains all U.S. police forces. Many of the American police officers are former Israelis. The IDF, the Israeli, which obviously now they're complicit now. Cause I'll bring that up because the Israelis are now known to be complicit in genocide. The Israeli military is known to have committed mass genocide, as even adjudicated by the complicit Western courts like the ICJ, the criminal Western courts. And so, but anyways, this is what was being asked for, right? Even with this huge uprising, right? What were the results of that, right? What are the results of the mass collective protest, riot, disruption of business as usual, cost to corporations and to businesses, right? Which Black Lives Matter did result in, right? What were the results of that? Okay, what is the police budget? 200. The federal year 2024, right, includes more budget increases for the police, right? What do we have? The Chicago PD's budgets are going up. Where the U.S. police spending, the U.S. police budgets are, the U.S. police would rank number 3 in world military expenditures. Okay, so the U.S. military, of course, the biggest budget, followed by China, which is not even close to the U.S. It's like a third of the U.S. military spending. And then the U.S. police forces would be the third largest military on the earth. Okay, so the U.S. police are really an extension of the U.S. military, where the U.S. is a world police that is shoving colonialism, racism, and capitalism, injustice down the throats of Africa, Asia, Latin America, everywhere. And the police shove, as the third largest military in the world, shove injustice down the throats of the United States citizens, in particular the non-white ones. Right? And this is a very simple, normal ask of Black Lives Matter, to stop spending money on that and start, spending money on things that people need, like healthcare, housing. The pandemic was happening, and can we get some support for healthcare, and also specifically, with the pandemic support? And the U.S. answer has been no. The U.S. answer has been, we will spend more money committing injustice against you on the police officers doing that. We will in fact bring, in fact, we will bring the Israeli genocidal forces to America, and IDF soldiers attacked pro-Palestinian student protesters at Columbia University. So in fact, not only will we not give you justice, we're going to bring literal genocide. Well, I mean, the U.S. police are also guilty of supporting genocide, arguably, but we're going to bring Israeli soldiers to the U.S., and we're going to have them spray this horrible thing. They sprayed this horrible chemical weapons, right? So this is a military attack. Some might argue that Israel has committed a act of war against the United States by using chemical weapons on American citizens, right? And it's not just some mace or some pepper spray. These two Zionists sprayed students with something. It's a chemical weapon called skunk. Both individuals who are wearing fake keffiyehs have been identified as Columbia General students and former Israeli defense soldiers. So these are soldiers. These are not just students, right? So there are foreign soldiers in the United States directly attacking United States citizens. And hands off of Yemen and Gaza. No more tuition for the war machine that was organized by the Students for Justice and Palestine. There are many, just as an update to that, there are many students, because universities, and I don't want to go too far off of this. I'm trying to stay on the justice topic, but universities of the West they've all been silent on when the Gaza University, beautiful university, was completely destroyed. The professors were killed, right? As the world-renowned Rifat, the Palestinian, poet, scholar, and amazing world a leader for justice in the world, was assassinated, all the universities and all of their tenured professors were silent. All Western universities said nothing, right? And so the students now are saying, we are going to boycott universities. I mean, I could tell you that it should have happened a long time ago. All Western school is diseducation machines, but the students are saying no more tuition for the war machine, hands off of Yemen and Gaza. Of course, Yemen as a supporter and actual justice dispenser, unlike the ICJ, unlike the U.S. and Western courts and entities. And that was organized by the Students for Justice in Palestine and the Jewish Voice for Peace, chapters at Columbia University outside the Lowell Library. Despite freezing temperatures and a systematic campaign of intimidation targeting opponents of the state policy of genocide in Gaza, the police drew around 300 participants. So, I mean, this is just the latest in ongoing rounds of injustice by the United States and its courts. The cop cities. I mean, this is even in Google. So this is a imperial information dispenser that I'm looking in, right? But so bills in Georgia aimed to suppress anti-cop city activists. Right? There are cop cities. They're basically giant mega police training grounds. That are being set up specifically to train militarized police, like the kind that killed George Floyd, right? Um, the United States has long for. I'm trying to find. I don't have a good article off the top of my head, but cop cities do not belong in America. The United States has seen a pattern of deeply disturbing tragedies. This is from earlier today, but yeah. So there's a $90 million cop city being constructed on indigenous land with a huge environmental, a very important forest in that area, and they want to destroy that and build a cop city. A police officer was shot. Since 2021, a few dozen Saw Cop City force defenders have been protesting the buildings of the facility. Trying to find how many there are. Okay, maybe I won't be able to find here. Atlanta should be taking $90 million. A third of the money to come from Atlanta taxpayers and spend it on things that will actually reduce crime, such as economic, cultural, educational development in communities where it's the worst. Cop cities are infrastructure for a police state at odds with the very idea of free society. There is a dangerous connectivity here between police violence against innocent civilians, particularly black citizens, attacks on environmental activists, and other protesters exercising their First Amendment rights, and the failure of our government to adequately address this challenge. Anyway, so this is just like one opinion, but I mean, long story short, there are cop cities all over the United States that are popping up. I mean, as a native Hawaiian, I want to just drop this in there that there was a cop city plan for Hawaii, and there still is a plan for it. By the way, this is not over. But this last year, the U.S. was taking a bunch of agricultural land in U.S. occupied Hawaii to train cops and military how to crush our native Hawaiian movements, anti-imperial, anti-colonial movements, and hurt people. And there was millions of dollars being pushed straight into this in Hawaii. Thankfully, they stopped it, but not what there was. There had to be a huge pushback, including online and in-person actions, protests, and people demanding not to build the cop city. Now, the United States still wants to build a cop city. They're gonna. I promise you, they're gonna try to build it this year. $1 billion drop in the tax collections prompts Josh Green to prioritize homeless initiatives, affordable housing, healthcare, and environment. And how is he prioritizing that? By building a $71 million cop city in Hawaii. Okay, so anyway, but start seeing red whenever I see this guy's face. But long story short, the United States is building cop cities everywhere. So why is that important? Because the ass of Black Lives Matter, right? Like I said, again, stop the police brutality, stop the police murder, stop the injustice and the racialized policing, and which is part and parcel of a whole host of other problems connected to racism, capitalism, and colonialism. Stop doing these things, or we're shutting the country down, right? Or we're gonna keep having these mass disruptions of 31 million people out in the street. This, of course, Black Lives Matter was a planet-wide solidarity uprising, but of course centered in the United States. And the response has been to increase police budgets, right? Joe Biden is increasing the police budgets bigger than ever before, right? Just trying to get a number there. The Los Angeles, Biden calls for $300 million for police departments to revigorate policing. So Biden has done the opposite, right? And the U.S. government in general has done the opposite of what was asked for, right? Yeah, how much? $129 billion on police. In 2020, I'm trying to get the 2024 number, or the 2023 number I can get. How much? Yeah, let's see. How much is the U.S. spending each year on police? 2023. Okay, this is just, I don't care about what you think your police budget is gonna do. You notice they make it very difficult for you to find the statistics because what the U.S. don't want you to know is that they are massively increasing their budgets. Joe Biden himself is doing that personally, and they don't want to talk about it. But like long story short, they're increasing the budgets. The injustice is not going away. Let me see if I can just get if somebody we search images, it comes out faster. Yeah. Police funding has remained about half of public spending. Okay. Well, here's just one. This is the trajectory of police spending, of one of the police departments. It's all on an upward trajectory. There is no cutbacks. There's not even an attempt. There's not even an attempt to make it seem. This is Chicago, right? There's not even an attempt to make it seem like they're doing. You would think that the Democrats or whoever is in charge of the United States, would at least try to make it seem like they are cutting back on the police spending and doing something, but they're not even trying. They're basically just increasing the police budgets. And the budget's not the only thing that matters. It's like what are the police doing, right? How many people did police kill in U.S. in 20? I think 2023 was the most deadly year, right? The U.S. police shot 1,153 people to death in 2023. This is like one of the highest ever in history of U.S. policing. Yeah. So as you can see here, in 2017 it was 985, and then it was 992, and then it was 1,004, and then it was last in 2022 is 1,096, and then it's 1,153. So the police murders are going up and up and up, right? The police budgets are going up and up and up. The injustice, the other things, healthcare, housing, education, helping the community get its basic needs met. None of that is getting better, right? Infrastructure, all that stuff is going down. So everything that Black Lives Matter asked for is completely just being denied, and so which would be deemed as injustice. And so that's not necessarily how courts function, right? Although the courts are complicit in this, because the court's job is to at least adjudicate justice and put all of the police officers should not be serving as police that have been doing all this killing. The justice system, if there was justice in the United States, would have already rooted all these people out. There would not be all of this increases in these illegal racist killings, right? And so whether you take this as a failure of or not necessarily a failure, but whether you take this as insufficient direct action to change the U.S. government's policies in the Black Lives Matter uprising, whether you view this as a failure of the so-called U.S. justice system, right, to dispense justice to the plight of people of color and the masses generally in the United States, it is an absolute failure of justice. And so, and it's also a failure of democracy, which harkens back to something I was talking about in a previous video. That is the is the U.S. a democracy video, right? Because what the masses demand, the end of that system, and we're not seeing that, right? We had the biggest protest in the history of the United States, right? If the United States were democratic with its masses, it would reduce its police budgets. It would do whatever it could to end the illegitimate murders. It would stop building cop cities, right? But it's not what it's doing, right? So it's not democratic. It's also, all of this is also a violation of human rights. Where's my human rights video? So I have a separate human rights video. How do we get human rights and enforce them? This is all violation of the human right to life. If your neck is knelt on for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and you're dead, you didn't have your right to life. That's the most important right observed. Among other things. So anyways, but anyway, that's a lot of going back into the Black Lives Matter era. But it's important to bring that up because it does relate to the current proceedings of the ICJ. And it's all part and parcel of that. In a sense that, the injustice against the Palestinians, also very important. The Palestinians and the Black Lives Matter, especially the original or the earlier Black Lives Matter actions in the early 2010s, right? Specifically in like Ferguson and a lot of the activists there who were murdered by the police. In order to put those down, the United States police, in order to subjugate those the Black Lives Matter activists in the early 2010s, they used IDF weapons. The U.S. police they were trained by IDF. They used IDF pioneered weapons of like these certain types of tear gas, kettling, basically population control. All of that stuff, right? In fact, Israel trains the world's most horrible forces, including South and Central American death squads. Israel works with European forces. They work with other forces in Asia, right? And so Israel is like the world's leading Western pioneer in injustice, apartheid, racist, colonialist control, right? Ghettoization and controlling the populations, right? So the ghettos of the United States are really mini Gaza. This is a thing that much of the Black and African Americans bring up, and that's why and African American and Black Lives Matter activists also have direct exchanges. Like for example, like in Ferguson, the Black Lives Matter activists were saying, how do we deal with all this tear gas? There's so much of this tear gas, and the Palestinians, were sending them, instruction videos about how to deal with the police, because the IDF and the Israelis and the U.S. police are basically the same. And they said what you have to do is, use a, cloth or something to pick up the tear gas canister when the police fire it at you, and then throw it back at the police, right? So, and if you drop the tear gas canister in a certain substance, it will neutralize the gas, like this liquid. Was it water? I can't remember. But they're like instruction videos, right? About this is how you deal with the police apartheid, injustice, police criminality, to subjugate you, because the Palestinians are putting up with that from the IDF, Israeli forces, right? And so there's a long connection between those struggles and other struggles worldwide. And so, okay, anyway, so back to the ICJ ruling on Gaza, though. So ruling on Gaza genocide is a historic victory for the Palestinians that Israel vows to defy. So number one, okay, so even if we say, well, this was because the court has ruled on the side of South Africa and the Palestinians, that which everybody can see, as again, this is what I mean. You don't need, right? Like we can see every day, every single day, we can see the hospitals being blown up on camera, multiple angles, people, doctors, UN workers, Palestinians, not Palestinians, right? European, American, African, Asian workers, teachers in the area are recording. Everybody knows this. They can see it. There's such a South Africa's case is open and shut, right? This is the most televised, the most visually live stream genocide ever, right? Where's that one? There's on video just yesterday, right? There was a guy holding a white flag coming out of the hospital. There was multiple people were holding. One of them was like a woman, and one was an elderly man holding a white flag coming out, and he was walking. And then they just shot him, right? The Israelis just shot him to death. I mean, this is one of I don't even know, hundreds of thousands of incidents, right? that every day there are more occurring. During the trial, Israel slaughtered hundreds of innocent civilians every single day, or at least like dozens to 100 or more. I think yesterday it was like multiple hundreds of innocent civilians were slaughtered yesterday, right, by Israel. So this whole time, while the case is being adjudicated, while the ICJ is releasing its, I mean, it's you have to be willingly blind. This is why the West really doesn't like this now, because again, if you can run away from the consequences of the global evil that is racist capitalist colonialism actions, particularly in Israel in this case, if you can make it too complex for people to look, what you want is just to get people to stop looking at the violence and to disconnect, to hide the bodies, right? That's what Israel's been trying to doing, right? That's what the U.S. police do. Which the media, universities, and the government at all levels in the Western white world are all complicit in hiding all of the Floyd bodies, because George Floyd is not the first person that was killed unjustly by the police, right? We just make up whatever story, and the news media, right, that's owned by the U.S. empire and the capitalists, racist capitalists that run it, they pay the news to repeat whatever lie the police put out, just like the Guardian, the BBC, New York Times, repeat whatever lie that the global oligarchies, Pentagon officials, and the DOD and neocons say to put out today, right? What was the New York Times line immediately after the ruling? The ICJ, the International Court of Justice, is violating Israel's rights, right? What did Canada come out and say? Canada on ICJ, right? Canada does not accept the International Court's ruling on genocide, right? I don't know if you saw this, because Canada, like the United States, is a settler colony. You're seeing it really clear, right? Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Europeans not accepting the ICJ ruling, right? And so so we can see the injustice happening right before our eyes, just like we could all see George Floyd being murdered by a white police officer right before our eyes, right? But in Palestine, this is even at a bigger scale than ever before. And the courts, even now, the court is ruling in favor of the Palestinians and siding with the South Africa's case, right? But the countries themselves are all in defiance of the So now you have the U.S., Canada, most of the biggest Western, criminal entities are all in defiance of their own biggest international court of justice, right? So it's it's just like they're like they like and then even beyond that, even if this even though the ICJ has ruled in favor of Palestine, Israel has already said before this, right, that Israel said, or remember that quote that basically this was like a smoking gun for genocide, right? So you can get that quote, right? Remember when Israel said no one will stop us, right? Netanyahu, the head of Israel, says, nothing will stop us, not the Hague. What that means is that because, right, the international, the Hague is where, genocide is adjudicated and people are hung for the crimes against humanity of genocide, right? And so because, Israel knows it's guilty of genocide. Benjamin Netanyahu knows he is guilty of genocide with all of his cabinet. And the reality is most of Israel, because most of Israel, important statistic not to forget, 60% of Israel said Netanyahu didn't go far enough. Okay, so Israeli citizens technically are all guilty of genocide as well. I don't know if there's enough rope for all of them, but this is the opinion of 60%. 35% of Israel says, I forget, there was a poll. 35% said Netanyahu did a good job. So that's 95%, minimum 95% of Israel is based upon that. If that's, that holds pretty true. Most of Israel is okay with the mass killing of innocent Palestinians. So they're all guilty of genocide in that sense. And importantly, any government that comes after Netanyahu will also almost guaranteed be genocidal, right? Because if there was a democratic vote in Israel, the vast majority would support worse than that. Because, you know, behind Netanyahu is the extreme far right that want to, they actually said, right, they're talking about nuking Gaza, right? Eliyahu said earlier in November that dropping a nuclear bomb on Gaza is an option. They're bringing that back, right? This past week, there were several Israeli officials that are even further right than Netanyahu who said, we have to nuke Gaza. We have to kill every Palestinian. We have to just kill every last Palestinian. Just bomb all the camps. Kill all of them. Kill all 2 million, right? That's where most of Israel is on that side. Most of Israel said you should have killed every Palestinian. You should have flattened it. You should have killed every Palestinian. That was the words of that was the sentiment of most of Israel. You know, or maybe not every, kill 1 million, kill half of them, right? They said 30,000, 35,000. That's too little. You should kill all of them. That's most of Israel. Okay, that's a genocidal entity. I don't know what that is other than a genocidal entity. Okay. So, as the Israel-Hamas war reached its 100th day, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed, "No one will stop us, not the Hague, not the axis of evil, and no one else." So, by saying nobody will stop it, he's speaking like a comic book villain. But this is not. He's just a real-world, normal villain, just like the United States that supports him and enables everything he does with the weapons and the billions of dollars that Israel needs to exist. The United States, the entire United States, all branches are all 100% guilty of war crimes under the Geneva Conventions, under international law as well, right? For their support, the United States is required under the international genocide conventions that it signed. The United States is required. I'm not even an international law expert. I haven't spent 8 years and $400,000 on a law degree to learn that. This is just basic knowledge. If you can Google this very easily. You know, even with your Imperial Stormtrooper engine, you can Google this information about the Empire, and the laws which it has agreed to, and the U.S. should be cut. The U.S. since 1948 should have cut off all aid to Israel. And certainly in the last 3 months, it should have cut all aid to Israel and all weapons and all money to Israel. Right? The United States is in violation of international law by continuing to support it. So, but I think many people know that now, right? And this is why there's increasing unrest and unhappiness in even all of their own in the U.S. and other countries, and that's why the protests keep accelerating, because people can see how unjust their entire countries are. But this is a smoking gun right here. He says, yeah, we're committing genocide, but nobody will stop us, right? That is the head of Israel that just said that. And they're talking about nuking Gaza. So how is how are the Palestinians to get justice, right? To stop this ongoing crime? How are even if the international court rules, there is no, people say, well, how is it going to be enforced? It's not going to be enforced, right? A criminal enterprise like the United States, Israel, the Western world in general, run under racist colonial capitalism, can only maintain the greater injustice with minor adjustments, right? Like, the U.S. government will literally not allow any of their war criminals in their cabinets, in their government officials. No American citizen, no American businessman, no American entity will be allowed to be actually punished. The U.S. has an actual clause that the U.S. will invade the Netherlands, right? Hague Invasion Act is a literal law that became a U.S. law in 2002, 22 years ago, that said the U.S. will use military force to quote unquote liberate any American or citizen of a U.S. allied country being held by the international court. So this, you see, this is like the United States has a law on the U.S. doesn't need a law because the U.S. doesn't abide by law, but the United States basically as a threat has put on its own books a law, the Hague Invasion Act, where it says the U.S. will invade, it will invade Europe in general. Not that it as if it hasn't already. It will invade the International Criminal Court. It will go into the Netherlands militarily and pull people out and kill Europeans. It should be very clear. The United States is willing to massacre Europeans who are their vassals, by the way. The U.S. is willing to massacre Europeans to pull war criminals like George W. Bush at the time, or Joe Biden, or Donald Trump, or all these people war criminals, or all of the Congress and every one of the U.S. All three branches, all the senators, representative, president, and Supreme Court, and many of the others across the entire United States government are all war criminals and criminals of various kinds for various reasons. And all of them, could be held in the International Criminal Court. And so the U.S. has a law to literally go to war. The U.S. will go to war to stop justice. So the U.S. doesn't need that law because Europe is already vassalized. The ICJ is already a vassal of the United States. Why is the ICJ? So if the ICJ and the UN are already vassals, and all of the judges in the Netherlands are so what is the purpose of law? The purpose of the legal system, the real purpose of the legal system in the West, is to give a facade of civility, justice, and civilizedness to the Western barbarian, unjust criminal world. It is the legal profession and law degrees are there to prop up a global imperial system with billions of dollars of student debt that is repackaged into Wall Street collateralized debt obligations and credit default swaps. It is busy work, like I was talking about last time, right? The legal system is part of the bullshit job, busy work for middle to upper middle class white colonial and settler colonial citizens, right? That are the stormtroopers of empire. And in the injustice, right? In the control thing, I talk about why, and so the rich don't necessarily need all of the white middle to upper middle class stormtrooper citizens with Excel spreadsheet and bar exam passing characteristics, and so that's why they're letting you get sick and die from COVID-19. But they need them. They need the majority of the millions of people to not revolt against their own governments, and so they pay them off with six-figure salaries, right? As university professors, as lawyers, as judges, all the ICJ judges, they get paid over six figures, just like Supreme Court judges, and just like many other judges in the U.S. and Europe. Just like corporate, finance, insurance, and real estate agents, right? So everyone who can afford, now it's a dwindling number, but everyone who can still afford a 3-bedroom house in a nice area that isn't full of arsenic and lead and wildfires, increasingly that's dwindling. That's why the game is changing. And so the legal system, which is full of, again, millions of people who have to go through this extremely expensive 8 years of school, which was constructed, as we pointed out earlier, in order to deny black people access to judgeships and access to become lawyers so that they can adjudicate law for themselves, right? And it's to filter out white complicit people in settler colonialism, and capitalism, who all are locked in based upon their mountains of student debt. They are all locked in based upon their LinkedIn networks, and they're all locked into that white supremacist capitalist unjust colonial system. And they get paid the six figures as long as they do the bidding. That's why you don't see universities standing up. That's why judges of the United States are basically rubber stamping. Judges are life support systems with very nice wigs and Judge Judy cloaks that are rubber stamping hands for 2.5 million black prison slaves. Every person unjustly put in prison is put there by a judge. They're a criminal by that definition. They are the slave auctioneers. The police are slave catchers, and literally that's how they began in the United States. And the judges are slave auctioneers. And more generally, under a capitalist system, they maintain the capitalist, right? Because capitalist countries have the best law money can buy, which is to say they have no law, right? And that's basically 90% of all court cases are decided by which side has more money. And who has the most money? The most illegal, horrible criminals like billionaires and mega corporations, big pharma, prison industrial complex, big oil, you name it. So the legal system of the West is not a justice system. The legal system in the West is systemic. It is a systemic, busy work for people who are capable of reading and writing and going to law school so you can learn mountains of nonsense and then sell your soul and pretend to know what morality is. That's what lawyers and judges are for. To give the semblance of civility to fundamentally unjust Western colonial capitalist countries, ideologies, systems, people, and to rubber stamp the war crimes of the United States across the world, including the war in Iraq. All courts in the West have all done nothing to stop the greatest crime against humanity, the war of aggression in Iraq, in Afghanistan. Again, as I said, Vietnam. There were no courts lifted a finger for that. No international court, no international Western court. No one touched that. So that's what courts for. In fact, Supreme Courts do 6,000 to 7,000 shadow dockets per year. What is that? A shadow docket. A shadow docket is it is basically those are cases, those are rulings that the Supreme Court will do in secret, in the middle of the night, often, with no public view, where they will rule on things like whether concentration camps where little children are held in cages at the U.S. southern border are legal or not, where children are rapidly dying. So the Supreme Court will rule in the middle of the night that those can continue to happen. The Supreme Court will rule that the bombing of innocent civilians in a school bus in Afghanistan there is no crime was committed. So the shadow dockets are basically, so the Supreme Court is really one of the most criminal courts on the earth, the U.S. Supreme Court. It rules on thousands of this, just the most heinous things you can possibly manage. Over a decade ago, it was going through about, is waterboarding and what they call enhanced interrogation techniques, also known as torture, what was being done at Guantanamo Bay. The Supreme Court in the middle of the night ruled that could keep happening, right? And nobody was allowed to know about it. There are secret tribunals. I mean, everything you could possibly imagine. So the purpose of the courts is to basically give the facade of legality to absolutely criminal entities, which is basically all of the power structure of the Western world, economic, political, you name it. It's taken until now to see that that's what's happening in 2024 for many people. If you're a person of color, you probably figured that out earlier. When you see your neighbors being rounded up or your parents being rounded up for standing in front of 7-Eleven while black by a white police officer from 50 miles out of your area, who is making $170,000 a year, right, to defend a white exurb in Orange County or in some nice white area of New York, to come into your neighborhood, find a black kid, that was skateboarding or just standing on a street corner, right, playing bottle caps or just hanging out talking to his friends, and the cop will come pick him up, throw him in prison, so that he can mechanically separate Tyson chicken nuggets for 25 cents an hour as a black prison slave, or be on a literal chain gang, because that's how they do. They have a white cop who makes $200,000 an hour, take a bus full of black people that Kamala Harris sell out to her own people, help round up, and this bus full of black people is what get unloaded next to a wildfire in California, and that's who puts out the fires for $1 an hour or less. Instead of paying an actual fire department, $30, $40, $50, $60 an hour per firefighter, they'll have a bunch of black prison slaves. So slavery is still alive and well in the United States. Very important to remember, which is not justice, by the way. And so you know that already. If you're a Native Hawaiian, you can see that black people are horribly over-incarcerated unjustly. Hawaiians are the most over-incarcerated. We have 4 times more per capita in prison than the average white person. And for similar crimes, right? Hawaii has the highest rate of children being rounded up in school right? So when I was teaching in a public school in Hawaii, which were the most underfunded schools in the United States, and I saw cops stopping kids crossing the street and then throwing them in prison for looking at the police wrong as a Native Hawaiian child or as a Pacific Islander child. This is the worst thing. Is this often it's even like brown cops arresting their own people. That's the most horrible thing. Internalized. It's very much Kamala Harris, right? So I always knew that there was no justice in that system, right? I'm watching all of these Hawaiians get auto incarcerated by racist police in Hawaii, and then sent off to Arkansas or to Arizona, right, to work as a Whole Foods vegan and non-vegan cheese producer, to work as the call center support for Dell and for Microsoft, which is a multi-trillion-dollar company, by the way, now, to work as Victoria's Secret underwear sewers. I mean, I already knew that the U.S. was an unjust system already by then. I mean, just by the environmental and racial injustice, our water's full of lead and U.S. military jet fuel in Hawaii, in our ghettos. The Hawaii state government and federal government is also guilty of genocide in Hawaii. And the like forms of apartheid, and certainly child theft, child targeting through CPS or removal to destroy our native lifeways. Very similar to the way that the 60s scoop and the residential schools destroyed indigenous people and their lifeways, stealing children from parents in the U.S. and Canada. And so for all of those, and so if you're a native person, if you're a black or brown, indigenous person, if you're a Palestinian, you knew that the U.S. and all of the West was absolutely not just. But now many white people and many non-native people and even people that have more money and access are starting to be forced to realize that this is not just systems. I mean, I think a lot of people ran away from Black Lives Matter. I knew a lot of white people who took sabbaticals, right? White YouTubers and white activists and educators and Marxists and all these things. And they just like said, I'm just going to take a sabbatical for the next year and not look at the news or current events during Black Lives Matter. Not all of them, but there was a lot, right? And then that's and so when no justice, no peace. And so when the peace is being disrupted, right? Some of the response is to run away from that. People, as how Nani K. Trask said, being political, saying this is what's happening to us, exposing that, and like, what are we going to do about that? And so there's chunks of the white and privileged classes that are run away into hiding. That's how you can tell. That's why, like, nowadays, if you see somebody who isn't at least said, hey, I'm for Palestine or I'm not, you basically, a lot of people are basically assuming you're for Israel then. So if people who on their social media who only post like pictures of their cat and like pictures of like, their favorite, their favorite food or something, and that's all they post, you can basically assume they're pro-Israeli white upper middle class people. You order like a Gen X or Boomer, which is most of them are, a lot of them are in that camp. 70% support Israel of Gen X, of Western Gen X and Boomers. 70% support Israel, according to one of the recent statistics. Right? They're just tuning out willfully, or many times willfully, most of the time willfully, sometimes just because they're complete idiots. But they're not. But either way, it doesn't matter. What it tells you is that and you're coming back to the justice, right? So how do we get justice, right? What it tells you is that, number one, justice is not given through courts. Now, justice can be dispensed in some situations through courts. If you're, the example I like to bring up is if you have two white middle class people and one car tail-ended another one or something, and you want an insurance claim, right, or something, or well, not necessarily insurance company, because the insurance companies are giant capitalist entities, and so there's a lot of injustice there. But if there's two people of similar privilege in a racist, capitalist, colonialist society, right? So two colonizer, white, capitalist, middle class people, and one of them like stole the other one's car or something for some reason. I mean, why would they do it? And then one of them says, "Hey, I want my car back," right? Here's the car, or they usually they won't do it. Or like this person like came to my house and I don't know, set my wooden front fence on fire because he was mad at me, right? Then the judge might rule, because the judge is going, well, these are two people Because two white people having a spat, two middle class white people having a spat. Now, if it's a rich white person and a poor white person, and the poor white person is like could be sent into prison, right? Depending on who the judge is. If it's a liberal judge, they'll send them to prison because then there's more black and brown voters to vote them in and do nothing for them, right? That's why liberals are berating black and brown people. You have to vote for Joe Biden, even though Joe Biden has done everything you didn't want, increased cop budgets, put more of you in prison, made the rich richer, kept racism going, right? But if it's a poor white person versus a rich white person, the liberal judge will say, well, if I arrest this white person and put him away, then we'll be more, this will help my Democrat. So we'll be more black and brown people around. Maybe I'll do that. If it's a Republican judge, they'll be like, let the white person go just on principle so we can have more white, we have more white power in the world. If it's a white person or a company versus a black or brown person, and if they're poor, it'd be like, well, we got to put them in prison. I mean, Democrat and Republican will put them in prison because we need more slave workforce and we need to keep white supremacy intact, right? It really depends on the day. But if it's two white people who simply have a spat between each other, then you might, if you're lucky, right? If you bribe the judge, because all judges are bribed. Look at insider trading. Judges are paid $10,000. 10,000 black unjustly imprisoned juveniles, right? In one state, a judge was paid $1 million. So $1 million for 10,000 black kids, right? So if you pay the judge enough money, remember everything is corrupt. Then maybe you get your verdict, right? So like for example, like if when Peter Thiel was in a standoff with Gawker Media for outing him as gay, which I mean that's not the best thing to do. I mean, I'm not saying that Gawker is great because they fought against multi-billionaire U.S. military contractor Peter Thiel and friend of Elon Musk. But Peter Thiel said, I'm going to throw $140 million into this case against Gawker to bankrupt them. And so in that ruling, that's just one example of these are like, and so the Gawker is run by a wealthy white man and Peter Thiel is a wealthy white man. Right. And so what he did was he threw more money into the legal case against his enemy and destroyed them. Right. And the thing is, and with law, it doesn't take winning. It's not about rational arguments. It's not about presenting facts, hearing arguments and discussing them and then coming to the best just conclusion. No, it's just here's tons of money for really expensive lawyers. You don't have enough, you lose. Right. Here's tons of money for really expensive lawyers. You don't have enough, you're bankrupt. Even better, right? This is what Disney does, right? This is what corporations do. You sign an NDA, they threaten you. They threaten you with economic annihilation, which is a death sentence in the United States. It could be worse than death. It's being poor in the United States, which is destitution, loss of your identity, loss of your friends and family network. We all know after you get COVID, everyone who used to love socializing with you, they're gone like a fart in the wind. And once you get poor, they're also gone. So the legal system is a mass economic violence system. It's a mass injustice system. It's just completely run by money, right? And the lawyers like it that way because they make tons of money being complicit knights in the barbarian jousting system jousting with words that is called courts, right? One way you can look at it is Peter Thiel was a king with 1 million knights, and Gawker was a minor lord with 200 knights, and then Gawker was destroyed by the money of the right. So that's how even between white people there's not a justice system either, right? Because there's still a capitalism hierarchy within that. So any system, and this is why the British have always, and the Western Europeans have gone really hard on legalism, right? Legalization, private law. Privilege comes from the word, it means private law, right? And legalism is fundamental to barbarians. The people who focus so much on the law and the rule of law and this idea of the justice, these are the most horrible people, right? Because if you have systemic, massive, unjust power over others, you can always weaponize courts, right? You can always, to put it another way, you have to have collective human. You need to not have a sick, barbaric culture and society in order to have functioning, even to try to have functioning courts, right? If people cannot be in community with each other outside of a court, right? You've already failed as a civilization. You're already barbarism. If everything immediately goes to a court for most things, you already have an injustice system. You probably have capitalism and feudalism, which is what Europe has always had, and that's what their courts, and that's why they go to the court first, right? Because if you have enough money, right, you have enough money, right? Like Western representative democracy, right? You can always somehow buy your rulings, right? Because if you have enough money, if the court fails, you can always pull out military force, right? But if you can crush while maintaining if you can weaponize your plutocratic, unjust, racist, colonialist appearance of being a good, just civilization like great civilized Britain, which is not. If you can weaponize the court to get done what it might take 1,000 knights, 1,000 soldiers to commit a massacre, rather than massacring all of the peasants or these people asking for justice, you can push it to a court, bribe the court, put bill. This literally in France there were, you could buy a judgeship. Same thing as in Britain. All of Europe was like that, right? So the judges in Europe, which is where they came from, they were the judges in Europe, and this is where feudalism and capitalism intersect. This is all just Western barbarism. In feudal Europe, you could if you weren't if you didn't have a family member, like let's say you're a royal family in aristocratic barbaric France or Germany or Austria, if you didn't have you're like, this court ruled against me. If your feudal French aristocratic family had enough money, where did they get that money from? Squeezing it out of the peasants' international colonial trade. Your feudal family could purchase for thousands and thousands of pounds or thousands and thousands of francs. You could buy a judgeship. So you would have a niece or a nephew would become a judge, and then from thenceforward, all of the rulings would go in your favor. And so that is how the legal system of the Western Europeans has been for centuries and centuries. And the same thing for the Roman and the Greek courts were the same way. Everything was run by money. So if you had enough money in a Roman court, you could basically bribe and you can buy the outcomes. And if that failed, the Roman murderous centurions would come and kill everyone that you wanted to die. And this would routinely happen. There were internal struggles, obviously burning their entire capitals down. But the Greeks were the same way. There was never any justice. They had a lot of philosophers thinking about justice. No, most of the population were slaves, Afro-Asiatic, basically black and brown slaves, to Hellenic peoples, and the women were second-class citizens. Thus spoke Aristotle. Aristotle said women should not wrinkle their foreheads thinking about politics. The women's place, actually, that was Thomas Jefferson quoting Aristotle. But Aristotle basically, but they're the same people. Aristotle said their rightful place is as slaves to their husbands, and the realm of the mind is not befitting women, and the realm of the physical body. So the women's job is to cook, clean, and have sex with the white man, and the black and brown job is to do all physical labor, because that is the design of the universe, is for those people to be in that state. And it is the white man's predestined role. It is the white man is platonically designed to think and to dominate and to control women and the oppressed classes, and to accumulate wealth, and to use that wealth to build a virtuous society under our great Greek democracy, right? And anyway, so this is so when you go back to the pictures of the Lady Justice and these Greek white statues of, this is the history of Western civilization. Number one, you living out it's like everything is completely screwed up and messed up. You have the whole, number one, the Greeks and the Romans were all capitalist, racist, oligarchic, anti-women, misogynistic, murderer, genociders that genocided indigenous people all throughout Europe, including the Celtic people, the people in the area called Gaul, the people in the area where Piccadilly Circus now exists, that they were indigenous people there and they wiped them out, like Palestinians by Israelis, like the American Indians or native people of Turtle Island by Europeans. The Greeks did the same thing all the way through Asia. The Romans did the same thing. feudal Europe was just a nightmare hellscape of failed colonizers that were colonizing each other. Basically, it's called feudal wars and infinite barbarism and purchasable courts. And the American Western democracy is a lot of fig leaves on that barbarism. And so courts are, that's why I think Western court, they should all just be abolished, because none of them do anything useful ever. Until the United States and Europe and the Canadian and Australia and New Zealand and these places are places where people, are capable of looking at each other, right, and going, hey, was that wrong or was that right? And we know, you can see that in the same way that the children being murdered in Palestine. This is what's happening, right? The Palestinians are a mirror to help. I mean, it shouldn't be this way. It's not fair to the Palestinians to be suffering so horribly. But the Palestinians are a mirror for the people of the United. This is where young people under the age of 35 are saying, fuck this entire system. Increasingly, it's burned all of it down. Western democracy, law, human rights, freedom, this court system, my university, right? Every day you see younger people, especially, I'm totally disillusioned. I'm a different person now after watching the last 3 months. Watching my liberal and conservative family members completely show themselves to be pro-genocide, watching my university be completely complicit in genocide, watching my corporations, my McDonald's, my Starbucks, completely complicit in genocide, all of the government completely, all the courts completely doing nothing, and I want to throw all of it out, right? That's the attitude. But that's what has to happen, because everything in the West basically is built from the top for thousands of years, top to bottom, out of evil. Or privileging selfish personal gratification and the short term, over everything, and fear and silence over courage and speaking out the truth and fighting for what's right, right? And that's why the East, which is most of the world, or there's 2 billion Arabs. That's more Arabs than all of the West, and they say it's the Great Satan coming from the United States and their colonizer friends in Europe. Because that's the way it's always been. The Crusades were an unjust Israeli power trip by Westerners coming into a universal healthcare having in the Birmanistan system, coming into Gaza and stealing the invention of hospitals in the advanced civilization that was in that Levant region. So, and that's another reason why Palestinians are at a important crux. Even the Christendom that was central to the identity of Europeanness and to whiteness and to Westernness and a global justification for colonialism, that even the Christ itself was stolen from the Arab world, from the Palestinians. Jesus was a Palestinian. And then none of the Westerners have ever followed any of his lessons. In fact, Constantinople took his cross and stuck it on his shield and went around the world and did... Jesus was a brown anti-colonial, anti-imperial resistance to the Roman Empire. That's what anti-imperial means, right? And the Americans put the Roman eagle on their buildings and on their money, and they took Jesus' cross, who resisted them, and Constantinople put it on his shield, because it would help him do genocide better in war. And so, right, so this is like, anyway, our kids were asking the other day, why is there a torture device and killing device on the great Western Christian religions, places of worship, And it's a good question. That actually says everything that you need to know, because the West is still a Roman Empire. And so, which is absolutely unjust, barbaristic, and destructive. So how do you get justice in that system? If everything if all of this is unjust, if the courts, you don't have to, you can say, well, no, one time I went to court and, I stubbed my toe and this black kid went to prison, and that's justice because my toe really hurt, and that's justice. I was in Israeli and I accidentally, shot a hole in my wall and the Palestinian got drone strike. That's justice. Courts work, man. Obviously, I'm being facetious, but even if you believe that the justice is coming even if you believe that the courts have some ability, obviously it's undeniable what's happening in Palestine to anyone with a soul. And so, how do they get justice, right? And how do they get justice, right? Well, one of the ways is with the direct struggle, and this is where I talk about how do we get human rights. I'm sorry, that's just pictures of myself. That's not what I wanted. But sorry, I got a lot of I'm trying to find my updates on Yemen. There you go. So there's a British, so recently there was a British ship hit by Houthis. This is one of many, as I have many videos about Yemen, so I won't spend too much time there. But a British ship was hit by Houthis or Ansar Allah carrying jet fuel. Maritime journalists say British ship Marlin Wanda is carrying naphtha jet fuel, which is highly flammable. If this ship sinks, it will be the first ship to be sunk by Yemeni strikes. And so, again, right, the if we accept it's a capitalist, racist, colonial system that only responds to money and violence and inability to get their way anymore physically, not because they, these are not law. The justice system is not a just system, and the Western entities are not just entities. They do not respond, right? The British and Americans, which are run by oligarchs and billionaires and massive, evil, horrible corporations that operate only for profit, and their personal, selfish individuals operating for their own selfish, unjust personal gain at the expense and loss and death and in suffering of everyone else and the environment. The only way to move the needle on it is with direct military action sometimes. I mean, many actions, obviously, some of it's protest actions, boycott actions, because boycotts do impact the bottom line, right? So the boycott, divest, sanction. Bisan called for a global strike for a permanent ceasefire. This was called for by Palestinian activists, right? And so why is that happen? Right? So in one sense, right, what Yemen is doing, which is enforcing a blockade, right, is costing billions of dollars. The port of Eilat at Israel is currently empty, right? And that is an economic cost under a capitalist system, which that is what is running much of this entire unjust global system. So then interrupting this flows of capital is a thing that will be responded to by this unjust system, right? Not legal adjudications, not moral prognostications by the ICJ or Supreme Court or the ICC or anywhere else, right? It is economic impact or loss of dollars to their line go up. It is loss of assets, military assets, or the threat of military force and the inability to pass due to direct military violent conflict, right? So the United States, like what happened recently was the United States ran a screening operation with regards to this ship. Maybe I can get a picture of that ship. The United States basically took a naval force. This is actually the ship on fire. It's still burning. As far as I know, it's still burning and it might sink. The United States ran a mission where at least two military ships were screening, or basically flanking the I think there were multiple merchant. This actually was a separate incident. I'm sorry, but there was an incident where there were two Maersk ships carrying military weapons to Israel through the Red Sea, and the two U.S. ships or multiple U.S. naval ships were stopping the missiles and other weapons being fired at these two merchant ships that are also full of military weapons, by the way. That's important. And Yemen already said we're blockading Israel until no ships going to Israeli ports or owned by Israelis will be allowed through the Red Sea until the end of the genocide, right? So they're tying it very closely. They're always saying focus on Gaza. Once the genocide in Gaza stops, right, then we will open the Red Sea up. Very important to reinforce, because there's a narrative that says obviously Yemen is just shooting at everyone and is causing havoc and chaos, and Yemen is just evil Yemen is just comic book villains, right? It's not. The two ships went alongside the two U.S. ships they fought for 2 hours. So Yemen would shoot a missile, the U.S. military would intercept that. U.S. would try to shoot back. Yemen has, they have like these, very advanced. Some of them are autonomous drone swarming warfare weapons. Some of Yemen is just, more traditional missiles. They have, the hybrid missile / drone weapons. They have they're like inventing new things on the fly as well. So is Russia and Iran and Hezbollah and Palestine. They're all part of the axis of resistance that are fighting against Israel and the United States and the West. They all have all kind of new tactics that are not even known. Many of these weapons have never been deployed, and they're just being deployed for the first time. And this is part of what's catching the U.S. also with its pants down. So the U.S. was intercepting after 2-hour battle. The U.S. could not stop the incoming missiles. They either ran. Also important, the Yemen drone weapons they're firing. One of these kamikaze drones is like made for $2,000 that could cause mega damage to one of these ships. Significant damage. It cost the American taxpayer. It cost the U.S. $4 to $10 million for the interceptor missile, for the Patriot missile to intercept. It's astronomical. It's ridiculous. It's unsustainable, right? That in the economic sense, in that way, right? So the U.S. has had to already fire off thousands. Okay, so just do the math. If you fire off 1,000 $10 million missiles, that's $10 billion. Okay, and in a very short span of time, Yemen is shooting. So Yemen can just keep shooting and shooting and shooting things. This is real cheap for them, right? But every time the U.S. has to intercept one of these missiles, it's costing it, mountains of money, right? That the U.S. already can't afford. So the U.S. is intercepting. After 2 hours, the U.S. ran out of missiles or proved unable to stop Yemen's assault. The merchant ships are hit or endangered, and the U.S. military ships had to turn around and go home, leave the Red Sea, and the merchant Maersk vessels carrying American weapons for Israel or goods for Israel all had to turn around and go home. After that, all of that shipping company said, we're not going to ever go with the U.S. Navy again. We're not going to send anything else through the Red Sea. The insurance costs, right? And the U.S. the insurance costs for all ships went way up. The U.S. military, whatever credibility the U.S. Navy and the U.S. military had, dropped way down. And so the impact to the United States, which is what's supplying Israel, its military capabilities destroyed. The U.S. lost the battle. Ansar, the poorest Arab country, won. Israel did not get its weapons to do genocide. That's a victory for Palestine and for humanity and for what's good on this earth. It's also it's on the side of what the ICJ has ruled, right? But importantly, so that victory, it was the United States military. This is what, at the end of the day, like I said, right? So this is what courts, right? This is actually a good example, right? The U.S. has, we signed on to the freedom of international, phone ops, freedom of navigation rules in international law. There's, we have many lawyers that will talk about the legalities of, maritime trade. This and that. The British are the same way. The British did this, the Opium Wars, they did this. The Opium Wars are very similar in China. They said, you have to accept industrial quantities of heroin to basically plunder and sicken your entire country to the benefit of the British Empire and enrichment of the British Empire with all your silk and your tea, your copper, and all of the contents and the great statues, artwork, journals, valuable jewels and gems and gold and treasure. All of everything you have, China, is Britain's now because freedom of trade. It was British ships, right? It was Western Anglo ships because Americans the Anglo Empire. But going into the Yangtze River, going through the South China Sea, and then cutting off China, and then forcing the will of the British Empire onto the Chinese. And so what's happening is this is like, so in one way is the what Yemen is doing in the Red Sea. This is the third Opium War, but it's the U.S. and the West for the first time ever. Any Western country losing the ability to control international traffic. The ramifications of this are immense. This tells the rest of the world, number one, the U.S. military is ineffectual. The U.S. military cannot stop the poorest Arab country. What is the U.S. military going to do to a powerful, wealthier Arab country like Iran? The U.S. is Lindsey Graham and the U.S. senators, Democrat and Republican, are talking about invading Iran. Iran is massively more powerful than Yemen, and the U.S. is everything it has. The U.S. picked this struggle. It chose the time and the day. It set this up itself, and it lost. The U.S. would have to send, by some estimates, 1 million troops into Iran to even try. Even if it wanted to try to win a war, the U.S. isn't even hitting recruitment goals, not even close. It's 80,000 short. The UK is talking about a draft, but if you have moderate COVID, you don't qualify for the British military because it causes you brain and physical damage. This is where the West is admitting now COVID's real, because their military will not accept you if you have had even moderate COVID, because they understand that it makes you so disabled that you can't operate as a military personnel. So I don't know where you're gonna. All of Britain's had COVID, so I guess British military. I guess all the U.S. and British military should all resign. I mean, literally, that'd be good, because then the world wouldn't have an enforcer of evil and an enforcer of injustice, colonial white supremacy, and capitalism, like I was talking about. But either way, what this is doing is in a sustained and increasing, escalating way. Number one is the Palestinians that popped it off. So I said, so again, what brings you justice, right? Is it court rulings? No, it's in a system of injustice. It requires a diversity of tactics, any means necessary. Again, this is echoing our previous videos on human rights and on democracy. To get all of those things, equality, justice, human rights, democracy, to make the world, to bring the good and the just into the world, it will require, in the face of injustice, all full spectrum response, all means necessary. Some of those are online, because as Palestinians said, share everything that we have posted. Share everything that we have posted, right? We're dying, but if we die in silence and nobody sees it, then we're dying for nothing, right? Because a lot of the acceleration is based upon the global loss of credibility and the global eruptions. A lot of these are led on. The political shifting is happening, and economic shifting is happening because of the sharing of the information. So don't let anyone ever tell you that sharing things online, whether that's on Twitter or TikTok or Facebook or Instagram or just messaging people. Don't ever tell anybody. Don't ever let anyone tell you that sharing is meaningless. You can get addicted to it. You can spend maybe too much time staring at your phone sometimes. But the Palestinians have said, and they have continued to say, we need everybody to share this, because this is the only way this information gets out. It's not getting out through the TV and the mainstream media, the university system, the school system. Are you kidding me? America doesn't have any schools that aren't COVID disease diseducation facilities, right? It just sure as hell, the school is not going to be telling you about what you need to know about Palestine, and certainly not the universities that are all complicit in the genocide and the massive six-figure salaries that all their administrators are getting. So the only way is through sharing this information, but the direct struggle is required, right? And the Palestinians, to be clear, Hamas is still going, which is the Palestinian government and the Palestinian people that are fighting for their own liberation. The direct struggle continues. Many of them are dying. It's horrible. But as I said previously, Palestinians are suffering a fate, too many of them worse than death, which is slow motion annihilation and torture to death. And the normalization that was happening with the West and Israel and the rest of the world with Israel was sentencing the Palestinians to a fate worse than death. And so many of them said, we will choose a death on our terms if we're going to die. And that is their belief. Hamas still has the majority of their population behind them. Hamas has a higher democratic will of the people than the United States government, any branch. So that tells you something. And that's despite all the horrors that have happened there in Gaza. And so it was with direct armed conflict that is continuing. And by the way, Israel's losing that armed conflict. Israel has had to pull out forces from all over Gaza, North Gaza. Their diaper forces of the Merkava tanks. The West doesn't show this, but this is the reality. You have to actually search this stuff out. Nowadays I have to kind of search it out. But when you look at the actual electronic intifada, has a lot of information. There's many sources that you can get that are not Western sources. But when you look the actual on the ground numbers, like Ukraine, which is also a lost war by the West, Russia's destroying what remains of the Ukrainian military, and all of Europe and the United States are all imploding with that economically, militarily, politically, and also in terms of just the global geostrategic reality. And the same thing is happening in Palestine, and which also is happening on the north with Hezbollah. Israel says they're going to invade Hezbollah. I don't know what they're going to invade with. Israel inside is actually collapsing. The Gallant, who is the military head, is in massive disagreements with Netanyahu. Every day there are massive protests to remove him from government. I'm not saying that any new government will be better, but Israel itself is imploding because, like the Ukrainian illegitimate criminal regime and much of their population, they are in a losing battle, and they're like losing their minds. They're like this bipolar, like we're gonna win. It's like at the end of Nazi Germany, it's like that. One day everyone would be like jumping for joy and exuberant, like yes, Nazi Germany will rule this earth any day now. Right before they lost, like all the battles were going wrong, but they were like doing all kind of strange weird prayers, like pulling out all the stops, getting all the rabbit's feet, like we're gonna win. The next day would all be in depression, and one of the Nazi officers would like grenade the other one, shoot the other one. There was like because the war was losing, and not just any war, it was a war of a genocidal, massive, horrific war crime that they knew they would be called to the mat for afterwards, or at least they would deserve it. They knew that many people would be very upset, and so inside of Israel, like inside Ukraine, everything is imploding. And so, and that is part of the beginning of justice for the Palestinians, right? Is the end of the unjust apartheid genocidal entity. Not just this strike, not just this snipe. This one time the Israeli lone wolf. This is like American lone wolf, shooter. No, the U.S. as a whole is an unjust settler colony, but in civilly. So people are saying there's disagreement about whether the ICJ ruling of no, they did not say ceasefire, right? And you could say some people are upset. Oh, that's a loss for Palestine because they did not get the ceasefire. It depends. There's I can't speak for these people for anybody, but what the Palestinians, no, they don't want to die, right? But the Palestinians also don't want a ceasefire and then go back to Israeli apartheid either, right? And in fact, many Palestinians are like, if we don't have a actual resolution to the historical and continuing injustice of the Israeli state, this genocidal, apartheid state, if we don't have a resolution to that, then we don't need it. We don't want a ceasefire on that term. And that's what they're saying, that they have refused some ceasefire negotiations. If negotiation is, well, Israel, we will take total. Israel's basically saying like, we will continue to be an apartheid state and we'll take total control and we'll give you some food, maybe. Right? Not that Israel ever does anything but lie, like the United States and its ruling classes and many of its population. And so the Palestinians said, no, we don't want that agreement. So in one sense, just getting a ceasefire isn't a win, right? It's kind of like, this is like when white liberals say, Black Lives Matter activists go home and then there will be peace again. And the Black Lives Matter activists will say, if we don't get out in the streets, right, then we just make it easy for the racist policing, the prison industrial complex, and your unjust racist capitalist system to just keep crushing us. Right. So even if, so you think of it that way, right? And there are many people who said that. Usually there are whiter, more privileged people that would say, let's all just go home and don't cause any problems in the street. Hey, don't protest in that street. Don't set up that camp, right? Just go home, right? And no, the United States didn't have a war or didn't have a armed struggle during Black Lives Matter 2020. But it's also like, it's also like it wasn't, you wouldn't call a lot of that peace, right? And so it would say like, you're not giving us justice, so we're not going to give you peace. So similarly, and now in the Palestinian sense, it's even more extreme. Like, you are giving us straight up murderous apartheid, and so you're going to get armed struggle, direct military conflict, until we get something that is, at least, even we need either like the end of your apartheid state. We need like, they have their, I forget the exact demands, but they have very specific demands. We want permanent ceasefire. We're not releasing your hostages because, you wagged your finger hard, right? We want permanent ceasefire. We want an acceptable amount of justice for our Palestinian people that will earn you that peace. Peace meaning not being resisted, right? Again, remember, peace, quote unquote peace. Peace is a weaponized word, like genocide, like human rights, like civilization. These are all white supremacists. Civilization means anything white and Christian. Genocide is when black and brown people do something, and not when the U.S. does Vietnam War, or genocide is only when that one time happened in Germany. This thing happened, and we ignore the genocide. We ignore the Jews doing the same thing that was done against Jews and other people that are also erased. Only Jewish people counted in the genocide, apparently. Not the Roma people, not other ethnic minorities in Europe, right? Muslims definitely don't count in genocide, because every European country is massively guilty of that. African genocides by white people, those don't count either. And so peace, like the word genocide, these are nonsense terms in English, I would argue. But when they're used, right, peace benefits oppressors. Peace benefits white supremacists under racist countries. Peace benefits capitalists when there is anti-capitalist resistance. Peace benefits empire in there if there is an imperial domination, right? This is why they killed Jesus, right? This is the original Palestinian resistor. One of the original Palestinian resistors, a Jewish Palestinian person. Palestinian is not just a Muslim identity. They're Jewish, Christian, and Muslim Palestinians. And a Palestinian resisting empire directly is what got him killed violently. Very similar to Martin Luther King. Resisted a U.S. empire, and then he got killed violently. And then what did the U.S. do after that? Say that Martin Luther King was very peaceful, and black people just be very peaceful. Peacefully hold up a sign, and then vote for us while we're killing you and putting you in prison with the U.S. police, right? So peace is not peace is, this is why there's a problem. There's an anti-war activist, and usually it's like, it can get tricky there. Like, we don't want war for no reason, right? Violence is not good, right? But simply having peace in the world under the greatest violence that is colonialism and imperialism, and that mass oppression of entire ethnicities, cultures, races, entire continents of people, right? Peace there is not preferable, right? Now, war between the U.S. and China with nukes is not gonna help anybody, right? Losing wars this is the thing, right? We should call the Iraq War the Iraq Genocide. We should call the Vietnam War the Vietnam Genocide. We should call, much of it was just genocide. It was like Israel blowing up hospitals and school children, which is what the West excels at. The West has never won any real wars against the global South, actually, against Arab, black and brown, indigenous people. Even Turtle Island, native plains natives actually beat American military. They had to starve and genocide their way through that with killing buffalo. Mountains and mountains of buffalo skulls, right? You can see the pictures of them, right? The West has never been good. This is why I have my Paper Tiger video, right? The West knows it sucks at war because they're a bunch of privileged, pampered, diaper baby cowards. And they're inefficient because of their capitalism, and they're full of privileged babies that are not hardened actual soldiers fighting for what's right. They also don't have the moral low ground. And that's why I have my Paper Tiger video. So this is why the West likes peace. The white, rich, and privileged and middle class oppressor classes, they like peace. They like the peace, that kind of peace. They want the white peace, right? Because they know that And this is why they want you to go through the court, right? That's what they told the Wet'suwet'en the Wet'suwet'en spent $2 million paying judges, paying lawyers, and to invest into this legal case against Canada. And Canada ruled in their favor. And then about 2 months later, the judge said, "Oh, did you spend all that money? Oops, I forgot. Here's a Canadian. We had this injunction, something. Oh, that case got thrown out, and now the pipeline's coming back through. So if you think you will win, right, against this unjust system through the court system, that is the way that you are destroyed, right? Similar to thinking that you can get representation in high places in movies or in the president, and that's going to win you justice in the racist, capitalist, anti-indigenous United States, right? I love Echo. I made a video about that. I like Black Panther is not a bad movie. Who Cloned Tyrone and what was that? I'm a Virgo or better, but All the Boots Riley's is better. But having a black president did not give any racial justice. Actually made things worse. Having an indigenous person in a high place, that can make things way worse. Tell me how I know, because in Hawaii we had a Hawaiian governor. We have Hawaiian people in the high levels in office and in government. There's a Hawaiian justice somewhere at a high level in the U.S. court. That actually is the worst thing ever. People who sell their own people out, these are the worst people. These are worse than white people because they hate their own people so badly. They have to prove to white people. That's why Kamala Harris is one of the worst mass incarcerators of black people, because to prove that you are a black person that is on the side of white people, you have to go 3 times as hard to mass incarcerate and hurt your own people than the white person does. The white person is just white, right? Are you a white person? As long as you aren't like in the street for black lives, you're going to get promoted in the racist United States. Are you a white person? As long as you aren't like watermelons and, hammer and sickle flags all over your bio, and you're like, decently well connected, you'll accelerate your career in the white United States, right? But if you're black, you got to be like 10 times. That's why Andy Ngo has to be like out there, like literally doing not fascism in Portland, trying to dox every last activist, racial justice activist to keep his job because he's an Asian man, right? And that's what they want, is they want everyone to kind of be quiet. We got Obama in, just go through the court and everything will be fine. And the reality is that number one, it's not going to be fine. Number two, without direct, full spectrum, any means necessary struggles that are not, it means, I'm not saying that everybody should immediately go and try to make war everywhere you can. Sometimes it just means like disrupting the nice, peaceful family dinner you're having, or nice, peaceful, I'm not saying go interrupt every single dinner, but it's also like, question all of your family members, interrupting the work meetings, asking questions about anyone at any time, anywhere. If the Palestinians are starving to death and being bombed and killed in their fucking hospitals, as long as that's happening, nobody deserves any peace anywhere. Nobody deserves brunch. Nobody deserves a nice, quiet little picnic. Nobody deserves to just be able to talk about their little fucking cat pictures. And, it's a war crime that Margot Robbie didn't win a, little golden man Oscar or some shit, she did a good job, but that's not the most important thing. Nobody deserves any peace. And in telling people of color, telling oppressed peoples, you should just make peace, is siding with the oppressor. It's like saying, hey, let's not question the Nazi regime during Nazi Germany. You're siding with the oppressor. And number two also, and then when you actually directly fight, you discover that these people are not capable of fighting. And the UK military, and the US military, even now more than ever, also complete useless, destroyed by the poorest Arab country. I'll read it one more time. And so that's how justice is. That is how justice will finally be achieved, to whatever extent it is, and that's to whatever extent it has. Nelson Mandela was not peaceful. Nelson Mandela was classified as terrorist, did direct violent actions. Was not. After the fact, all of the white Western liberals are plastering posters of him and saying he was such a peaceful, nice little peaceful man. He spent a lot of his years of his life suffering in prison, and he did a lot of direct violent action. And until the noughties, sometime in the noughties, the U.S. classified him as a violent terrorist extremist. And that's what it took to finally move on apartheid. After the fact, they like, oh, apartheid happened because Bono and a bunch of liberal and progressive British and Americans felt sad, and they blessed the rains down in Africa with some shitty white man concert, and everything was healed. No, there was direct violent struggle against Boers, against white supremacy, against Elon Musk's billionaire families, and other people like that. And there was some international support. The Vietnam War didn't end because some anti-war activists in the United States said, hold the poster up and said no war. The Vietnam War ended because the Vietnamese directly militarily defeated the United States as a very poor Asian country. And the Palestinians in Yemen, they all looked to Vietnam and to China as well. The Chinese also had their own armed struggle under Mao with Mao and other of their armed struggle against the multiple imperial occupations, and in particular the Japanese imperial occupation, with the support of the West. That's how they got to the place they are now, with the most successful poverty alleviation and the most advanced, prosperous country that has some courts that actually function and actually disperse justice, including beheading 15 Chinese billionaires and also mass incarcerating thousands and thousands of corrupt officials, political and business, and stopping China from becoming like the hellhole that is the U.S. and the West. That was what they have always been. But it took, in the beginning, again, it was not a peaceful talking it out. No amount of degrees in law moves the needle whatsoever towards justice. Very important. Very important. Many Palestinian activists, I heard multiple now, say, my parents wanted me to become a lawyer and to become an expert on human rights law so that I could fight in court for my Palestinian people. As a Palestinian in the diaspora, expelled by the violence and these horrors in my home country, I no longer want to be a justice. I don't want to no longer seek a law degree as a Palestinian, because I can see that is not an avenue where any change is happening whatsoever. This ruling will not make basically any difference. It will make a difference to some people who believe in the law, like who? Upper class privileged white liberals. Everyone else who knows anything about anything else, most of the world knows that that's not where this comes from. Most of the world can see the United States talking about phone apps, talking about international property theft by the Chinese and by the rest of the world, and then they can see the U.S. turn around and go, oh, oops, we don't want to be part of the WTO anymore. The second it doesn't benefit them. So most of the world already knows that there is no justice to be had in any international court or Western court, right? That's not where this happens. The Yemeni army that is bringing justice for Palestine, they're not legal experts. They don't have law degrees. You know what they have? Yemen has a lot of high quality engineers. You know what they have? They have militarily trained, much of that to the starvation and genocide and bombing that the U.S. has already inflicted on them, very similar to Gaza. And the Yemen has principled people. They're principled because they look at each other's eyes and they say, hey, are you right with God? Are you when you meet Allah, are you going to be able to say that you did your best for what is right? Right? It's like, there's another way to say it. It's just like, hey, are we doing the right thing? And the others will call them out and they say, you're not doing the right thing. Why aren't you are you watching this abuser in our community? Are you watching this sexual abuser in our church? This guy has to go. And everyone calls each other out because they're all in community together. They have all been struggling together. If there's corruption, they root it out, and that's what they've done. And that's why Ansar Allah is in charge. And even the minority government that is backed by the West, the puppet government, they even turned around and they said, we are sorry for going against Ansar Allah in Yemen, and we express full support with Ansar Allah and their actions because they know that that's what is right. And so having a functional, healed, moral, just civilization, not people with 8-year degrees in legal scholarship, that is what actually is bringing justice to the world. Not the ICJ, not the 6-figure judges in the ICJ, ICC, US, and the West, not the billions of dollars of lawyers and billions of lawyers. The more money that is spent on lawyering, I argue that is the depths of depravity. Each dollar spent on legal student debt is another step into hell. You have and in lawlessness and the war of all clowns against all hell you have wrought. So you should be this. I mean, and this directly impacts the finance, insurance, real estate, and bullshit jobs, right? All that's bullshit jobs. So all should be whittled down, and people should be learning how to grow food, things that are actually complicated, like how to engineer a hypersonic glide vehicle. That's complicated, you know. Not what is right and wrong. How to balance the needs of the environment to stop desertification in your region, and deal with the biological sciences, grow food in Yemen while you're being starved. The United States is denying UN food program aid in right now, starving Yemen some more. How do you stop starvation? And by growing foods, use new fertilizer, invent new growing technologies and processes. How do you work with solar? How do you build solar panels and engineer them and place them properly? Where do you get the materials from? How are we going to leverage this burgeoning industry we have? Dig holes deep enough so the U.S. can't bomb it. That's where Yemen, and that's where Palestinian, and that's where Hezbollah has their industry is underground because they keep getting fucking bombed. So that is complicated. How do you dig a hole 100 meters under the ground, build an underground hydroponics facility, an industrial lathe, and then churn out tractors and weapons that you need to defend that's complicated. That's engineering. That is math. That's tech. That's science, right? That's biology. So a lot, you know, there's some amount of sociology. How do we organize our people so that we're moving in the right direction, right? This is not like law degrees. This is not like anthropology. I'm not saying anthropology, sociology, and the humanities is bad, right? Studying history and humanities is good, but I mean, we were studying it from a Western, brainwashed, whitewashed colonizer perspective that has been written, the curriculum written by fucking PragerU, which is where that's like average Western culture, Western school now. They're like burning all the books in all Western libraries as we speak. And all Western schools are having the books ripped straight out of them. They don't got to burn the books or just remove them, as Zach De La Roca once said. A Mexican anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, not that peaceful of a guy, circa 1992, when the U.S. used the Insurrection Act to attack black and brown activists after Rodney King. So those are complicated. Those require research. Those require, you know, and like knowing your history, that's important, right? But it has to be the actual history, not the bullshit history taught by the Western K-12 and the university system. That's why we have Silver Spoon University as one outlet for education when you become a Patreon member, right? But and finally, that's what gets the justice, is the ability to withstand, right? Yemen's ability to withstand the mass violence that will be enacted trying to bring about justice by a whole host of things, making alliances. So diplomacy, that's necessary study. How to deal with other countries, to make alliances, to cut a deal with Iran, to help with the thing. Yemen does their own thing. They have autonomy. They are allies. Get some help, get some blueprints, get some funding from China and the BRICS to, you know, give you some very actually forgivable, not debt trap loans, unlike Western loans, so you can build your own economy up, right? That is legitimate study. and building your economy up, building your pathway to liberation, and to building the economic, societal, civilizational pathway towards bringing about justice is how justice is had, right? The investigation into Western sciences, like economics is a science fiction degree. That's what it is. It's a degree in nonsense. Nothing that they teach there has any impact on the real world. I quote Michael Hudson, author of Super Imperialism, and Yanis Varoufakis. So I have both an American emperor and I have a OG Greek emperor. Sorry, not emperor, but you know, Yanis was simply the finance minister of the Greek Western OG Western country, and they both say that, you know, so economics. Western economics, law, Western, you know, a lot of philosophy is just rich white global genociders staring at their belly button lint, collecting the global tea, copper, and coltan and all the resources and slaves from the rest of the world, thinking about what would it be like to have morality, right? I mean, that's not how you get to a moral civilization, is by philosophizing, sitting on the top of bloody skulls. Law, philosophy, sociology, anthropology. Anthropology is just the OG CIA to overthrow countries by trying out, figure out which wife to marry to take over. to a large extent. And when it comes from a Western perspective, all of that, finance, insurance, real estate, all that stuff that people want you to go into in the West. That is what is eroding. That is what has deindustrialized the West as well and made them more vulnerable. That is what has and that is what has prevented justice from happening. Instead of building community, obviously organizing the community, educating the community. I mean, with actual education, it means anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, BIPOC education, not Western white racist capitalist education. All of that, learning how to teach that is, that's all legitimate. That eventually will get justice, right? But number one, justice doesn't happen because you go to court. Justice doesn't come out of courts. Justice, and certainly when you have such a deep infestation, it's like going to court is like taking an aspirin when you have stage 4 metastasized breast cancer. That's in every organ in your body, right? You can take aspirin and you feel a little better, I guess. It's a plus. I mean, I guess it will keep your hope up a little bit, and then you die from the cancer, right? And so that's where the West is. It has stage 4 metastasized cancer. You need a deeper chemotherapy, which is all those other things. It's not, the justice does not come from the courts. And it is now 1:30 and I got to go. So I hope that is, telling you, I hope that, I know this is a bit upsetting what I said, but that's my job, is not to give you a peaceful, tranquil daily experience as a Native Hawaiian, also as a non-binary Native Hawaiian, and also under U.S. colonial occupation, colonial capitalist occupation. My job is not to, if you are a white middle class person, which probably you are if you watch YouTube, statistically that's what you are. If you feel comfortable and having a very peaceful life in your daily life, then I'm failing to do what I need to do to get justice. And if you aren't learning and questioning things, I mean, I am learning and questioning things on a frequent basis as well. As somebody who was raised to be a high frequency trading Goldman Sachs algorithm programmer, white person but maybe only 3/5 of a white person because of my skin color and my nose shape and my face shape. That's what I was trained to be. Right. And so so every day is uncomfortable for me in some way. Every day is uncomfortable for me. This may be 100. It's hard to, relearn my native culture, or learn for the first time a lot of my native culture that was denied to me, because it's very painful and it hurts. Because I think of my parents who were denied that, and they hate themselves because they're brown, but they hate themselves because they're poor and brown and they're surrounded by whiter, richer people, when they shouldn't just feel bad and try to be those people. But, that's not comfortable for me either. Because genocide is not comfortable. Cultural genocide, and obviously more uncomfortable for Palestinians. But so that is, the justice comes from slowly not becoming an expert in any particular, not in a going into the trap, as I said in the Echo movie, right? Like falling into the empire's clutches. When you go to Western University, it's like going to work for the kingpin in many ways. And when you go to law school, you are definitely working for the kingpin. You're defending his property rights in the niceified Hell's Kitchen, New York. And so getting justice means becoming human, right? It means humanizing yourself for the first time as a Western white middle class settler colonizer. It's like it's approaching the level of actual humanity that the Yemeni and the Palestinians have, right? It's just like approaching that. You'll never get there probably, but maybe one day the children's children will get there. But I mean, you for material geopolitical reasons you can. But the justice doesn't come from justice is not an engineering problem. It is not an intellectual discursive problem that requires 8 years of study and many 100-page white papers. This is that is an illusion of the West, right? Oh, they're very smart people who listened to a lot of true crime podcasts and watched Ally McBeal and went into many court battles. That's how those people are good at justice. No, they are good at normalized criminal defense. They're good at maintaining criminality. That's what the justice system does in the West. That doesn't make you good at bringing about justice. That hasn't brought justice. You need somebody to get people bailed out of a mass protest when 6,000 people get arrested supporting Palestine. But you don't need to, if everybody's investing their time and energy into that, then you are wasting all your people. You're wasting, you have limited number of people to do these necessary struggles. And if, right, that's why the Palestinians said, I'm not going to waste my time going to law school. Because once I get out, what is it going to make? What impact is it going to make? This is the thing that they want. This is why they don't want. This is why they want kids to go straight into school when they're 18 years old and they're half drunk on their hormones and literal alcohol to decide, oh yeah, I'm going to go to this college and get saddled with this massive ball and chain of student debt that I can never pay back, and it will make my life a horror and never allow me to qualify for a housing loan unless I have rich parents. They want, right? And so they want you to kind of just fall into that pattern. Once you are too deep into that debt and into that investment into Western college and into Western legal and corporate systems, you get locked in like a feudal knight, or a lord, if you happen to escalate yourself. And it's hard to get out once you're in. So we have to watch that out as well. And but anyway, so that is the end of the stream. If you would like to support us, don't forget you can give direct support through Ko-Fi at ko-fi.com/silverspook. If you would, if you appreciate the education that we try our best to give, I do a video and also 3 multi-hour streams every single week. So it's a lot of time, but I try my best. But if you would like all of the indigenous left education that combines decolonized history, current struggles, imagined futures, cultural analysis from my perspective as a native Hawaiian activist, educator, science fiction writer, and professional game dev, that tells you what you need to know today, what do you need to teach your children today, from Western lies about past and present and future permeate formal schooling, modern books and media, and visions for the future are shrouded in fog of war and collapse. And so, and when you become a Silver Spook Patreon member, you get access to the Silver Spook University. That's over, I think it's about over 1,000 hours of education, entertaining videos, holistically combining economics, history, politics, and hard and soft sciences, and more. And that is just one of the benefits that you get, especially if you're somebody who's like, I have kids and I don't know what to teach them, and I know that the school is probably not going to teach them very good stuff. So what can I do? This is a kind of basis for what you can teach your kids, and not just kids, any adults as well. And also, you get access to the Silver Spook Discord and behind the scenes on what we're working on, such as Neofeud 2 updates, as well as other Silver Spook endeavors like the Silver Spook Housing Cooperative and the Silver Spook. We're taking a lesson from the Yemen and trying to build as much food security as possible, as we possibly can, here in the one of the least colonized parts of Hawaii. But also, you can get Neofeud. It is a game it is a cyberpunk adventure game that is on sale. It is in the vein of Blade Runner with overlay of Game of Thrones, like political intrigue and hand-painted stylized visuals. It is a game I spent 2.5 years working as the writer, artist, programmer, and musician and voice actor for most of half of the lines. And you can also support Neofeud by leaving even a very short review, because it does help us to get the game discovered in the algorithms of Steam. You can also get Neofeud on itch.io for Windows and for Mac and for Linux on with itch.io. You can also get the game for on sale, and it's also DRM free, and you can get it without installing Steam if you don't like Steam for whatever reason. You can also get, there's lots of other games like the Colonators. Speaking of colonization, have you ever wanted to directly get justice? In the Colonators, use the armed struggle to get justice, not a court, by kicking out the capitalist colonizer genocide doers. In the Palestinian genocide of the 1970s, that was the Vietnam genocide that was kicked out by the Vietnam. I have to think about that some more. I'll workshop it. The Vietnam genocide that was kicked out by the Vietnamese armed struggle. The genocide of the Vietnamese by the U.S. that was kicked out by the Vietnam armed struggle. And so there is the Decolonators. There's also Indigenous Star, Patient with Gun, and Woman is a book by Holly, who was raised in right-wing evangelical Protestant Christianity. And it is not a historical retelling, but a work of fiction that is lends to a different perspective to what is usually read. And this book is free, or you can get you can throw some money our way when you pick it up. Also, at Silver Spook Games at Octodon.social or at Silver Spook Games at Mastodon.social is where you can follow. And of course, you can follow at Silver Spook Guy. Sorry, I'm just reading an update. Even more every day, more victories for the axis of good, which is the Arab side. But anyways, the Silver Spook guy, you can follow at Silver Spook guy, at Silver Spook Games minus the Ian Silver. You can also follow Terminus Cyberstar is the account for my Deus Ex Total Conversion sequel, and it is a Deus Ex System Shock 2 cyberpunk RPG that you can get, or is not out yet, but it is in development, and I'm the content director and lead writer for Terminus Cyberstar. And finally, you can follow also Holly. Holly is at the Tech Fairy. Holly is, of course, partner here, wears many hats for the Kate Nix music and variety show. The next episode is coming out this Tuesday, so check that out. Parent and caregiver to 2 native hawaiian children here at the Silver Spook Cooperative. Writer, educator, and Savic queer person, and also mask wearing and person with MECFS, which is like long COVID, actually very similar, despite some upset people that are mostly dudes for some reason. But anyways, you can also follow Holly, and don't forget thanks everybody on the list for your support, massively appreciated. Without your support, it does become very difficult for us to keep on doing this work that we try our best to do. And so we will be back in the evening for the Twitch stream, and I hope you can hang out for a bit. I'll be talking about I want to talk about some environment stuff, maybe environment, and I didn't talk anything about the Texas stuff. That's got to come up at some point. But anyways, we'll see you later. Have a good one, and keep your shades polished, be excellent to each other. And remember that justice does not come from a court. Justice comes from a full spectrum struggle, including sometimes not peacefully, against the greatest injustices.